Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. Fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallahu wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. আমরা গত প্রায় 18টা হালকা বা 19টা হালকা ধরে একটা টপিকের উপরে কথা বলে যাচ্ছি, তার বিভিন্ন সাবসেকশন। ইসলাম দ্য কমপ্লিট ওয়ে অফ লাইফ। তো আই ডিভাইডেড দ্যাট ইনটু ডিফারেন্ট সাবসেকশনস। সেটার উপরে আমরা কথা বলে যাচ্ছি। যারা মানে বিশেষ করে রঞ্জু নতুন এসছে, আমি ওভারভিউটা দিই যে দিস ইজ দ্য ওভারভিউ অফ ইসলাম, the complete way of life. Components of deen. What are the various components of deen? These are the various components of deen that one can classify: imaniyat, ibadat, akhlaqiyat, muamalat, muasharat. ওটা সম্বন্ধে আমরা আলাপ করেছি। What are the sources of Islamic law? And what are some attributes of Allah? And the kalima introduces us into the worship of Allah. So what is the reality of the kalima, the inner meaning? আমরা জানি যে kalima মানে হলো যে আল্লাহ ছাড়া কোনো মাবুদ নাই এবং রাসূলুল্লাহ সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম তার প্রেরিত বান্দা। কিন্তু এটার একটা inner meaning আছে. There is an inner meaning of the kalima. So we went over that, and then the central theme of Islam is the worship of Allah. And there are two parts to the worship of Allah. One is the obligations towards the Creator, and the other is the obligations towards His creation. And then what is implied in success in Islam? We have a definition of success in worldly terms, but what is success in Islam? We talked about that. And then we talked about the nature of man. Allah Ta'ala, so very surprisingly for me, when I found out that Allah Ta'ala spends a significant part of the Quran, about 2.5% of the verses in the Quran are on the nature of man, the weaknesses of man, as per the Creator who created man. What does he talk about the weaknesses of man? Because we need to know about those weaknesses, and we need to guard against those weaknesses. And also we need to know about the reality of the dunya, because it is through our weaknesses that shaitan seeks to derail us, and it is through our use of the dunya to satisfy our weaknesses, our nafsaniyat, our base desires. We use the dunya to satisfy our base desires. So the shaitan uses both of these, our weaknesses for various things in dunya, to derail us. So we went through all of these in great detail over a number of sessions, about 17 sessions. And then one brother, Tawheed from 10th batch, he suggested that I summarize these. So I took one session to summarize 1 through 7. I wanted to summarize up to 8, but could not get the time. So I took one session to summarize what I discussed in 1 through 7. And then I took one session to summarize the reality of dunya, and the next session, which is shaitan, deception of shaitan. So two sections, reality of dunya and deceptions of the devil's deception in one session. So that was the last session. And in this session, we'll talk about how do we dispel shaitan? How do we dispel shaitan through Quran and Sunnah. We take the help of Quran and Sunnah to dispel shaitan. So in the last session, we talked about devil's deception. Firstly, we talked about wisdom. I summarized actually. The details were in the first 17 sessions. So in the last session, I summarized devil's deception and the various topics I talked about are devil's deception in 5 steps. I did not talk about the wisdom behind the creation of shaitan. Why did Allah Ta'ala create shaitan? We talked about that in the detailed session. And among the wisdom mentioned by the scholars are that the creation of shaitan enables us to perfect our servitude to Allah Ta'ala by struggling against shaitan. Because shaitan is there and he's there to deceive us all the time and to derail us. So that enables us to perfect our servitude to Allah. And it also, the existence of shaitan and actually the manner shaitan worshipped Allah Ta'ala, and then through his blunder, he was thrown out of paradise, out of his lofty position that Allah Ta'ala gave him. So that also enables us to increase, that story enables us to increase our fear of Allah. After we see the fall of shaitan from grace, he got a lofty place, but he fell from the grace. So this first part I did not mention in the previous session, but there are other wisdom of the creation behind the creation of shaitan, apart from the 2 that I just now mentioned. I started with devil's deception in 5 steps, that how he deceived Adam alayhi salam. He came to Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam and told them that Allah Ta'ala told you not to go to the tree because that's a tree of eternity that will never deteriorate. That was the first step. And the second step, he enticed them that if you go near the tree and you eat the fruit, you will be among the angels. And Allah doesn't want you to be among the angels. And the third step is he tells them that if you eat the fruit of the tree, you will become immortal. And Allah doesn't want you to become immortal, and you can worship Allah Ta'ala forever. So even though you may commit an error by eating the fruit, you'll become immortal and you can worship Allah forever and forever. And you can seek forgiveness from Allah Ta'ala by worshiping him forever and forever. So that was the third step. And the fourth step is he swears by the name of Allah that what I'm telling you, I'm a sincere advisor to you. And I swear by the name of Allah that what I'm telling you is true. And Adam alayhi salam could not think that somebody can swear in the name of Allah and lie at the same time. So that was the fourth step. And the fifth step through which Adam alayhi salam finally eats the fruit of the tree is through forgetfulness. So the basic point is that shaitan does not come and straight away ask us to disobey Allah Ta'ala. He does that through incremental steps. So that is the wisdom behind knowing the story as to how he derailed Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam. And then number 3, shaitan cannot force mankind to commit sins. He has not been given the power. He has no power over the believers. So that's why we have to elevate our level of iman and amal to the level of believers so that Allah Ta'ala can consider us among believers. We are among the believers. So we have a level of iman, which is the level that is there, iman mawjud. What we need is iman matlub, the level of iman that is needed to be among believers. And once we are among the believers, then shaitan will have no power over us. He is able to gain control over those who follow his ideas and follow him willingly. Shaitan has power over those. The next is we can defeat shaitan, as Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, we can seize him by his forelock and defeat him and overwhelm him. Number 5, there are various tactics of shaitan. He tries to lure us to commit shirk and kufr, firstly. And if he fails in that, then he tries to make us or lure us to commit bid'ah, innovation. The third is he lures us to commit major sins. If he fails in that, he lures us to commit minor sins. Minor sins which pile up, that becomes big, that becomes huge. So he wants us to commit minor sins. If he fails in making us commit major sins, then next is minor sins. I'm failing in trying to, yeah, here it is. I'm trying to mute so that when somebody is not listening and somebody is talking, we are not disturbed. So that we are not disturbed. So number 5 is that the tactics of shaitan. So he lures us to commit shirk and kufr. If he fails in that, he lures us to commit bid'ah. If he fails in that, he lures us to commit major sins. If he fails in that, he lures us to commit minor sins. If he fails in that, he promotes permissible acts like eating, sleeping, drinking, waste our time in that, in entertainment. If he fails in that, he lures us into less virtuous deeds. And if he fails in that, he lures us into corrupting our acts of worship, showing off, for example, riya, that corrupts our acts of worship. And if he fails in that, he stirs up doubts in religion. And if he fails in that, he tries to harm the person. Shaitan is indefatigable, that means he does not tire. He sits on the straight path. He comes from the front, he comes from the backside, he comes from the right, he comes from the left, and he does not tire. He takes an incremental path. He tries to put us into gradual deception, to shirk. And he tries to exploit our weaknesses. He flows through our blood. He flows through our body like blood flows through, and does not openly call us towards disobedience. There are 3 sources of waswas. One is our own self. Allah Ta'ala mentions in the Quran about waswas within a person's own self that comes from our base desires, our nafsaniyat. The second source is shaitan among the jinns, and the third source is shaitan among mankind. People can come after being overpowered by shaitan among the jinns to try to derail us. And there are waswas coming from within us and waswas coming from shaitan. Types of waswas. And the punishment for waswas, there is no punishment for waswas if we do not act on the waswas and if we do not tell anybody. And one of the ways of shaitan is to make falsehood appear attractive. He makes attractive to the mind that which is harmful and discourages us from that which is beneficial. And he beautifies sinful action between man and woman by giving beautiful name to it, platonic love or friendship, or that we are liberated. So what is the harm in relationship with women? Those who are negligent, lazy, shaitan takes one type of tactics with them. And those who are enthusiastic, shaitan takes another tactics with them. And then he makes us make statement about Allah without our proper knowledge about Allah. And that becomes extremely harmful for us. We are talking about the creator without having proper knowledge about him. Shaitan himself argued with Allah Ta'ala about Adam alayhi salam after not prostrating or not carrying out the order of Allah Ta'ala. He makes false promises and raises high hopes, which is mentioned in the Quran. He causes people to forget commandments of Allah. And that is what happened to Adam alayhi salam towards the very end. And the fate of shaitan and his followers is punishment in hellfire. So today we will talk about means prescribed in Quran and Sunnah to dispel shaitan. Last week, after talking about all of these, I could not summarize them. So in the next session, we'll talk about dispelling shaitan, some additional considerations. So that I will summarize next Sunday. And I will bypass the do's and don'ts in the Quran. So what are the means prescribed in Quran and Sunnah to dispel shaitan? The first is adhering to the straight path. Adhering to Quran and Sunnah in words and deeds and thought. So that's the greatest protection. And in very simple terms, if we follow the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he actually followed Quran and he laid down additional to the Quran, and those were inspired by Allah Ta'ala. So whatever he did, the first line of defense is the obligatory acts, and the second line of defense are the Sunnah, and the third line of defense are the Nawafil, Nafal. So there are a number of lines of defense that he taught us. So when we follow his Sunnah, we are following the Quran also, because his life is not devoid of the Quran. It's not just his Sunnah. It is also his following the Quran. And that is the greatest protection. And that I would term as the greatest knowledge, because our greatest enemy who's ever ready to derail us is shaitan. And whatever Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did was mostly to protect against shaitan. And then there is another purpose behind the Sunnah, and that is whatever he did, part of that was to show us beneficial actions, beneficial in this world. For example, the manner he sat and ate, it does not allow us to fill our stomach. The manner he slept on the right side, the heart is on the left side. So when we sleep on the right side, we are not putting pressure on the heart, which is on the left side. The manner he used the bathroom, there is beneficial aspect for us. So whatever he did, there is benefit in terms of protecting ourselves from shaitan, and there is also worldly benefit in his sunnah. So following the Quran and sunnah, and then number two is seeking refuge with Allah Ta'ala. Allah has instructed, and if an evil whisper comes to you from shaitan, then seek refuge with Allah. And say, my Lord, I seek refuge with you from the whisperings of the shayateen, which is plural of shaitan, and I seek refuge with you, my Lord, lest they may attend or come near me. Islam teaches us to seek refuge with Allah in certain situations, such as those mentioned in the following pages, A through S. 19 situations are mentioned. Seek refuge with Allah during the day and night. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, whoever says in the morning, La ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. And the near meaning is, none has the right to be worshipped except Allah alone. La ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu. He has no partners. Lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu. To him belongs the dominion. Lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu. To him belongs the dominion, and to him belongs all praise. Wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. And he is over all things omnipotent. He has power over all things. Has indeed gained the reward of freeing 10 slaves from the children of Ismail, and 10 of his sins are wiped away, and he's raised 10 degrees, and he has found a safe retreat from the shaitan until evening. Similarly, if he says in the evening, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, he will be protected until the morning. Seek refuge with Allah. Dispel shaitan from the house. So when we enter invoking Allah by saying Bismillah or giving salam or reciting Ayatul Kursi, there are various du'as that are provided to us that seeks to dispel shaitan from the house. There's a story that a person once came to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he said that I and my wife always quarrel with each other. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told him, when you enter the house, give salam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So you are invoking the name of Allah. And after some days, he came and said, we do not fight with each other. Dispelling at the time of anger, when we get angry, that's one time when shaitan can overpower us. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, one Sahabi, his name is Sulaiman ibn Ard, I think. Sulaiman ibn Ard or Ward, I forgot. He was sitting with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he mentions that two people, they were abusing each other, and one of them got red with anger. And at that point, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, I know a word which if he recites, he will be able to protect himself from shaitan, because when we get angry, shaitan overpowers us. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, he can be protected from shaitan if he says the word. And then Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from shaitan, the accursed. And he said that his anger would leave him. So whenever we get angry, what I'm presenting are just some approaches to dispelling shaitan. There are more than that, but time is limited, so I cannot get into more than that. It is also prescribed that when we get angry, if we are standing, we should sit down. in addition to reciting Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, we should sit down if we are standing. If we are sitting, we should lay down. Our anger would subside or reduce. And we should also make wudu, because the effect of water on the body is to cool the body. Dispelling before food, drink, and entering house once again. Jabir radiallahu anhu said, I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, when a man enters his house and remembers Allah, the exalted, upon entering and before eating, so he invokes Allah, remembers Allah upon entering the house and before eating, Shaitan says, there is no place for you to spend the night and there is no supper for you. When he enters the house and does not remember Allah, Shaitan says, you have found a place to spend the night. And when he does not remember Allah upon eating his food, Shaitan says, you have found a place to stay and have some supper. Dispelling before food, drink, and entering house some more. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has commanded us to protect our wealth by mentioning the name of Allah while locking doors and covering vessels. Also, one should drink while sitting, because Shaitan drinks with a person who drinks standing up. When you are about to eat, you should say Bismillah. In the name of Allah, I begin. And if you forget to say it before starting, then you should say, when you remember, you should say Bismillah awwaluhu wa akhirahu. In the name of Allah, in its beginning and the end. Dispelling before going to bed. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when you are about to sleep, recite Ayatul Kursi till the end of the verse, for there will remain over you a protection from Allah, and no shaitan will draw near to you until morning. And it is also mentioned that we can recite, or we should recite it up to 3 times before going to sleep. And then there are other surahs that are mentioned and other duas that are mentioned in addition to that. Dispelling upon a nightmare, when we, while sleeping, suffer a nightmare and we get up, we should turn to the left and spit 3 times, the act of spitting 3 times. And I also heard that we should recite Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, turn to our face to the left and do the act of spitting 3 times. Dispelling when approaching wife, Ibn Abbas reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if one of you says when approaching his wife for intercourse, Bismillah, Allahumma jannibna shaitana wa jannibish shaitana wa ma razaqtana. In the name of Allah, O Allah, make us distant from shaitan and make shaitan distant from what you bestow upon us. It is mentioned in the remaining part of the hadith that if a child is born from that act, then the shaitan has no part in the child. And now reflect upon it. How many people engage or approach their wives and do not recite the dua? And what happens to the children that are born as a result, based on this hadith? Dispelling when entering washroom. Zayd ibn Arqam radiallahu anhu narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, these places are inhabited by devils, the washroom, the bathroom, the toilet. So when any of you enters the washroom, let him say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika minal khubthi wal khabaithi. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika minal khubthi wal khabaithi. Oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from the male and female devils. I seek refuge with you from the male and female devils. As long as we cannot read the Arabic, we can read it in Bangla, we can read it in English. Oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from the male and female devils. Khubse wal khabaise, male and female devils. That will also suffice. But we should learn these du'as. There are 3 things, actually 2 things in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One is he performed a certain act in a certain way. For example, going to the bathroom, he entered in a certain way, used the bathroom in a certain way. And the other is he mentioned certain dua. Both we should learn. because, we learn so many things of dunya. But we have an invisible enemy who is after us all the time. He does not take rest. We sleep, but he does not sleep. He is always after us, indefatigable, does not tire, does not take time off, finds when we are away from the remembrance of Allah and enters our body. We have to know about him, his tactics. We have to spend some time in, I would say, one of the most important acts of our life, that is protecting from shaitan. The educated person is educated in so many different ways, but does not know how to defend himself or herself from his worst or her worst enemy. That's a tragedy, I would say. We do not know who our enemy is, and we do not know his tactics. We do not know how to defend ourselves from his tactics. And we are educated. Dispelling when entering masjid. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu said, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to enter the masjid, he would say, Auzu billahil azimi wa bi wajhihil karimi wa sultanil qadimi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge with Allah, the mighty, and his noble face, and with his eternal authority from shaitan, the accursed. He then said, when a man says this, shaitan says, he has been protected from me for the whole day. Dispelling during prayer, Uthman ibn Abil As came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, the shaitan comes between me and my prayer and the recitation of the Quran, and he's confusing me. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that is a devil called Khinzab. If you notice that, then seek refuge with Allah from him. That means say, Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and spit dryly to your left 3 times. Uthman ibn Abil As said, I did that, and Allah took him away from me. Do not walk in front of a person praying. We know that it is very much practiced in our part of the world. So much so that we are discouraged from walking in front of a person far in front of him. We can walk far in front of him as long as we do not walk in front of him. What is prohibited is walking in front of him. And at that point, we have been told to stop him from walking in front of him, because when a person does this act, walking right in front of a person, he is possessed by shaitan. Dispelling before reciting the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran that we should, before reciting the Quran, say, Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, because, Quran seeks to purify our heart. And when a heart is purified, it is enlightened with nur. And when it is enlightened with nur, we can see the straight path. Shaitan does not want that. So we have been asked to say, Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim before reciting the Quran. Dispelling when leaving the house, Anas radiallahu anhu reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever says when he leaves his house, Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allahi wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, or illa billahil aliyil azim, the complete version. In the name of Allah, I place my trust upon Allah. There is no power nor movement or ability except in Allah. And he is protected when he leaves the house. And in other places, it is mentioned that we recite Ayatul Kursi when we leave the house and when we enter the house. Ayatul Kursi. Dispelling when stopping on a journey. When we stop on a journey for rest, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that we recite Auzu bi kalimatillahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq. Auzu bi kalimatillahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq. I seek refuge in the perfect words of Allah from the evil of what he has created. I seek refuge in the perfect words of Allah from the evil of what He has created. Then nothing in that place will harm him until he moves on from there. Now, the detailed file is in Google Drive. So all these du'as are there. Dispelling shaitan when calamity befalls. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if something afflicts you, do not say, if only I had done such and such. And আমি যদি এটা করতাম তো ওইটা হতো না. Don't say that. But say, Qadar Allahu wa ma sha fa'ala. Qadar Allahu wa ma sha fa'ala. Allah has decreed this and He does whatever He wills. Allah has decreed this and He does whatever He wills. Indeed, saying if opens up the doorway of shaitan's handiwork. Dispelling shaitan from your children, Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when night befalls, John Shonda hoy, Surjo dobe, keep your children inside, for the shayateen spread out at this time. Then when 1 hour of the night has passed, allow them to go out again. Reciting last 2 or 3 surahs, narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to bed every night, he would cup his palms together and blow in them after reciting the last 3 chapters of the Quran. Cup your palm together and blow on them after reciting the last 3 chapters of the Quran, Surah Ikhlas, Surah Falak, and Surah Nas, and then wipe over the entire body as much as possible with the hands. So cup your hands, blow over the hands after reciting the 3 last surahs, and blow over your body as much as possible with your hands, beginning with head and face and front part of the body, and then the back part of the body as much as possible. And he used to do it up to 3 times before going to bed. And there are other du'as before going to bed. Reciting the Quran with raised voice drives away shaitan. Once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was walking by the house of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu at night, and he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was reciting the Quran in a soft voice. And after that, he walked in front of the house of Umar radiallahu anhu, and he was reciting the Quran in salat, both of them in salat. And namaz porar shomoy. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu during prayer, but in soft voice. Umar radiallahu anhu during prayer, he was reciting the Quran in loud voice, so much so that the neighbors were disturbed. And when later on, possibly the next day, they met up, 3 of them, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them that he walked past their houses, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was reciting in a soft voice, and Umar radiallahu anhu was reciting in a loud voice. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, I was reciting in a manner so that Allah could hear. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, I wanted to wake up my neighbors, so I recited in a loud voice. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, recite in a little louder voice, raise your voice somewhat. And he said to Umar radiallahu anhu, lower your voice somewhat. That means don't disturb your neighbors. Because do not, what he implies is do not recite in a soft voice, because when you recite in a loud, in a voice, raised voice, not in a loud voice, but in a raised voice, that drives away shaitan. And I want to share with you that I have been reciting my tasbihat, and I said to you in one session that because of my continuous headache as a result of a neurological disorder, I have to recite tasbihat for 4 hours. And I used to do it mostly softly. But after reading this, I started reciting in a loud voice, and I get a better result from reciting my tasbihat in a loud voice. And this is S. This is the last one among the tactics we have been given to dispel shaitan. And the last one deals with why we don't get refuge when we seek refuge. And what is mentioned is seeking refuge is like a sword in the hand of a warrior. If the hand is strong, then the sword will be able to deal the fatal blow to the enemy. Otherwise, the sword will not harm the enemy at all, even if it is made of varnished iron. Similarly, if seeking refuge is done by one who is pious and fears Allah, then it is like fire which burns the shaitan. So our strength of iman is very important. Our piety is important. Fear of Allah is important. In other words, that comes from effort. That fear of Allah comes from effort. We listen about the greatness of Allah. We about the stages of life to come, and about the exalted status of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We talk about these, the greatness of Allah, the stages of life to come, and the shortness of this life, and that we have to leave the world. We have to stand before Allah Ta'ala. We have to give hisab, account before Allah Ta'ala. So when we listen about these, we talk about these, we think about these, and we see the greatness of Allah around us, then the greatness of Allah enters the heart. So it is something that is acquired. Iman, high level of iman, is something that we have to acquire through effort. It does not come just because we are the children of Muslims. The third section is keeping busy with zikr. It is narrated in a hadith that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam commanded Yahya alayhi salam to enjoin 5 things upon the children of Israel, one of which was, I command you to remember Allah. A man cannot save himself from his enemy, that means shaitan, except by means of remembrance of Allah. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to remember Allah Ta'ala all the time. 4, sticking to Jamaat, adhere to the main body of Muslims, that is the Jamaat, by living amongst believers. That is an important word. The level of iman that is desired. And choosing righteous friends who will help him to do good. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, whoever among you wants to attain the best part of paradise, let him adhere to the main body of the Muslims. For the shaitan is with the man who is alone, but he is farther away from a group of 2, and is even further away from a group of 3, and so on. It should be noted that the Jamaat counts for nothing if it does not adhere to the Quran and the Sunnah. Opposing the shaitan, that means whatever the shaitan wants, do opposite to that. If shaitan comes to you while you are praying and says, you are showing off, so cut your prayer short, then make your prayer lengthy. If he infuses riyah, showing off, when you are praying, say, this is for Allah, reward will be doubled. If he says, you have invalidated your wudu, he infuses doubt, say, you are lying. Wudu does not get invalidated from doubt. If he says to you that the dead can hear you and benefit you or harm you, tell him you are lying. Also, when we know that doing something or doing it in a specific way is from the characteristics of the shaitan does in a certain way, we should oppose him by doing it differently and follow the sunnah. For example, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, when any one of you eats, let him eat with his right hand. And when he drinks, let him drink with his right hand. For shaitan eats with his left hand and drinks with his left hand. And take a midday nap, because the shayateen do not take a nap. Kailullah, midday nap. Knowing his tricks and means of foiling. This is to know the plots of shaitan mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, and shaitan's conspiracies against the believers, how he tempts people into committing sins, distracts one in his prayer and from good deeds, how he plants discord between husband and wife, and how he instills doubts in a man's heart by whispering to him. One who recognizes these plots of shaitan and their remedies can effectively dismiss him and his whispers by implementing the sunnah of Allah's messenger. When shaitan uh, said to the Lord of glory, by your glory, O Lord, I will keep trying to misguide your slaves so long as their souls are in their bodies. I will not tire. The Lord said, by my glory and majesty, I will continue to forgive them so long as they ask for my forgiveness. So whenever we commit an error, a mistake, a sin, a disobedience, we should repent right away, as Adam alayhi salam did. That's the difference between Adam alayhi salam and Iblis. Iblis sought to justify his disobedience by giving argument. I'm better because I'm made of fire and he's made of earth, Adam alayhi salam. Adam alayhi salam, when he committed mistake, he immediately sought for Allah's forgiveness. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Abu Umama radiallahu anhu narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when Iblis had descended to the earth, he said, "O Lord, you made me descend to the earth and you made me an outcast. Appoint for me a house." This is an interesting one. So let me finish with this one. Allah said to him, appoint for me. What is the first thing he said? Appoint for me a house. Allah said to him, it is the bathrooms. Shaitan resides in the toilets. He said, make me an assembly or gathering. Allah said, markets and shopping places are the worst of places. Shaitan asked again, assign for me food. And Allah said, every food on which the name of Allah has not been mentioned or pronounced. Shaitan said, decide for me a drink. Allah said, wine or intoxicants, any intoxicant, addiction. He said, appoint for me a caller, announcer. Allah said, it is musical instruments. He said, make for me a Quran, for me a Quran. Allah said, poetry. He said, decide for me a writing. Allah said, tattooing on the body. Shaitan said, assign me a discourse, talk or chat. Allah said, lying. Then he said, appoint for me a messenger. Allah said, the fortune tellers and soothsayers. Shaitan said, decide for me a hunting means with which I can hunt or trap people. Allah said, woman. And when we see woman, this is one dua that is prescribed for us. Allahumma inni auzubika min fitnatin nisa. Nisa is woman. Protect us from the fitna of the woman. So these are the various subsections: adhering to the straight path, seek refuge with Allah, dispelling shaitan any time of day or night, dispelling from the house, dispelling at the time of anger, dispelling before food, drink, and entering house, dispelling before going to bed, dispelling upon a nightmare, dispelling when approaching wife, dispelling when entering washroom, dispelling when entering masjid, dispelling during prayer. Do not walk in front of a person praying, dispelling before reciting the Quran, dispelling when leaving the house, dispelling when stopping on journey, dispelling shaitan when calamity befalls, dispelling shaitan from your children, reciting the last 2 or 3 surahs of the Quran, reciting the Quran with raised voice drives away shaitan. And why don't we get refuge when we seek refuge? It is because of our lack of iman or weakness in iman. Keeping busy with zikr is one means to protect from shaitan, ourselves from shaitan, a remembrance of Allah all the time. And that is difficult, you know. But if we do every act in the manner Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, that would also be zikr of Allah. When we perform any act personal, family affair or a communal affair in the manner done by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we will be following his footsteps, and that has the effect of protecting us from shaitan. So the sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is so awfully important. Sticking to Jamaat, opposing the shaitan, knowing that his tricks and means of foiling shaitan, repenting and seeking forgiveness immediately. So I want to summarize in more detail, but time does not permit me, because I summarized what we discussed in the last session in today's session. So that took away some time. In the next session, we will add to how we can dispel shaitan. There'll be some additional points. And then that would be the end of this long series, which actually would have taken us, including the summaries. The last two were summaries. This one is summary, and the next one will be a summary. So that would be 21 sessions on Islam, a complete way of life. May Allah Ta'ala give us the ability to act on these. Some of it is conceptual, but a large part of it is practice oriented. We have to practice on them. You know, we have been sent. We did not come on our own. We have been sent, and we have been sent with a purpose. The tragedy of man is he does not know the purpose for which Allah Ta'ala sent him. And even those who know the purpose, their iman is so weak, they cannot do the things that can make us fulfill the purpose, or their iman is so weak that they cannot obey Allah Ta'ala with such a weak iman. The Sahaba learned iman. Iman is something that has to be acquired, has to be learned. In halqa of ta'lim, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to teach them iman. And because our iman is so weak, I want to share with you a sorrow in my mind. You know, we have been going through over the last 11, 12 months a plague or pandemic that has devastated our life. We cannot lead our normal life. In Bangladesh, people are defying, and they make themselves believe as if things are normal. But in many parts of the world, things are far from normal. Total number of cases, 103 million so far, which have been reported. And there are so many millions that have not been reported. 103 million. 10 কোটির বেশি. Deaths, 2.22 million. 22 লক্ষর বেশি মৃত্যু. 25% of the deaths are in one country, the USA. Over 26 million deaths out of sorry, I'm making a mistake here. 2.6 million deaths. Sorry, 26.1, 260,000 deaths. Sorry, 260,000 deaths. Out of the 2.22 million, 25% in USA. Sorry, cases. 26 million is the number of cases in the US. So 1/3 or 1/4 of the cases, 103 million total cases, 1/4 of the cases are in the USA. And of the 2.22 million deaths, 440,000 cases, again 1/4, are in the USA. The reason I'm mentioning this is the sorrow part, is because of the sorrow part, which is that I see my friends, there's hardly any change in them. Hardly any change. Even those who are in this country or Canada. And I wonder to myself, in which world are they living? Won't they die? This virus will end one day, will not be there one day in our lives. But death is something that is inevitable. And when I say my friends are hovering around 70. আমাদের বয়স 70. So sooner or later, death is going to overtake us. And I know some of these people, they pray, but they think that just by praying, they're doing whatever they need to do. The rest of the time they can spend as they want to spend, based on their desires. Their life is hard. There's hardly any change. There's a tremendous change in the world. And that should make us take a pause and be prepared for the eventuality that may or may not come from this pandemic, but sooner or later, that eventuality will come. We have to die. And the probability of death for any person is the same, whether he's 70 or whether the person is 7 years old. The probability of death is the same, which means we have to be prepared for death all the time. Last night, there was a meeting of the Cadet College Club of North America. They approached me time and again so that I attended. So I finally attended. Again, they are living in a different world, it seems to me. And I stayed there for an hour or so. And after that, they were supposed to have a cultural program during such a time. I wonder in which world we are living. I just want to give you a reminder of that we have to change ourselves. Every act of worship we do should be done in a manner better than the previous time we did it. Every prayer, every zikr, every tasbihat, every act of helping somebody, every good deed should be done in a better and better way. And we should be prepared. We should be preparing for the eventuality that will come sooner or later. We will pray for two persons who passed away. One is the mother-in-law of Professor Georges of Dhaka University from 15th batch. His mother-in-law passed away. And the other is somebody he just stepped into his youth, 19 years. Ashfaqul Islam Alindo, nephew of Gokul and son of Asad, both from 18th batch. And we will pray for all our relatives who have passed away. We will pray for Topu's and Dipu's father, 15th batch Topu, 18th batch Dipu, who is in a subconscious state for the last over 4 or 5 weeks. We'll pray for him, that Allah Ta'ala may grant mercy on him. And we'll pray for all our relatives and ourselves who are sick. And we'll pray for the well-being of all of us in the world, for the forgiveness of all Muslims, and for the guidance of all mankind. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, jazallahu anna Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before that, let me request you to recite Surah Fatiha once and Qul Hu Allah, Surah Ikhlas 3 times. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد جزا الله أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وسلم معه أهله لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم سبحان الله رب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك وغنيمة من كل بر وسلامة من كل إثم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا دينا إلا كزيته ولا مجاهدا إلا نصرته ولا مظلوما إلا نصرته ولا مسلما إلا رحمته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا إلا كزيتها يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين ألف لام ميم لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين إلهكم إله واحد لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم اللهم أسألك من خير ما سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا واخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين ربنا إننا سمعنا منادي أن ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الميزان وقنا عذاب الصراط وقنا عذاب المسيح الدجال ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما ربي اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا تقبل دعاء سبحان ربي العلي الأعلى الوهاب سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته ربي أني مساني يضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين ربي أنزل منزلا مباركا وأنت خير المنزلين اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين والله 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 তুমি আমাদেরকে যা কিছু আমল করার তৌফিক দিয়েছো আল্লাহ আমরা কোনো কিছুরই যোগ্য না আল্লাহ তৌফিক পাওয়ারও যোগ্য না আল্লাহ তুমি আমাদেরকে অশেষ দয়াবশত আমাদেরকে মানুষ হিসাবে তৈরি করেছো আল্লাহ রাসূলুল্লাহ সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লামের উম্মত হিসাবে পাঠিয়েছো আল্লাহ এটা তোমার অনেক অশেষ মেহেরবানি আল্লাহ তারপরে কিছু আমল করার তৌফিক দিয়েছো আল্লাহ যদিও আমরা তার যোগ্য না আল্লাহ ও আল্লাহ কিন্তু তৌফিক পাওয়ার পরে না আমরা একটা আমল ঠিক মতো করতে পেরেছি না একটা নামাজ ঠিক মতো পড়তে পেরেছি না একটা কিয়াম ঠিক মতো করতে পেরেছি না একটা রুকু ঠিক মতো করতে পেরেছি না একটা সেজদা তোমার শান মতো করতে পেরেছি আল্লাহ না একবার তোমাকে তোমার শান মতো ডাকতে পেরেছি আল্লাহ ও আল্লাহ না তোমার হুকুম আমরা ঠিক মতো মানতে পেরেছি আল্লাহ তোমার হুকুমের পর হুকুম আমরা অমান্য করে চলেছি তারপরে তুমি আমাদেরকে তৌফিকের পর তৌফিক দিয়ে গিয়েছো আল্লাহ ও আল্লাহ এটা তোমার অনেক অশেষ মেহেরবানি আল্লাহ ও আল্লাহ أنت أرحم الراحمين يا راحم المساكين يا ذي القوة المتين তুমি সবকিছু কবুল করো আল্লাহ তার ভুল ভ্রান্তি সংশোধন করে কবুল করো আল্লাহ এবং তার সওয়াব রাসূল করিম সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লামের কাছে পৌঁছে দিও আল্লাহ এবং তার সওয়াব আশফাক এর রুহের কাছে পৌঁছে দিও এবং জার্জিসের শাশুড়ির রুহের কাছে পৌঁছে দিও এবং আমাদের প্রিয়জন, নিকটজন, আপনজন যারা কবরে শায়িত তাদের রুহের কাছে পৌঁছে দিও আল্লাহ। তাদের কবরের আযাব যদি মাফ করে না থাকো তো তুমি তাদের কবরের আযাব মাফ করে দিও আল্লাহ। তুমি তাদের কবরকে প্রশস্ত করে দিও আল্লাহ। তুমি তাদের কবরকে জান্নাতুল ফেরদৌসের বাগান বানিয়ে দিও আল্লাহ। তুমি তাদের অন্ধকার কবরকে নূর দিয়ে পরিপূর্ণ করে দিও আল্লাহ। তুমি তাদেরকে উঁচু দরজা দান করো আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, ও আল্লাহ, তুমি তাদেরকে কিয়ামতের দিন প্রত্যেকটা মুসলমানকে তুমি আল্লাহ কিয়ামতের দিন আরশের নিচে ছায়া দিও আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, প্রত্যেকটা মুসলমানকে কবরে উঁচু স্থান দিও, কবরে তুমি তোমার সর্বোত্তম ব্যবহার দেখিও এবং কিয়ামতের দিন তোমার সর্বোত্তম ব্যবহার দেখিও, আরশের নিচে ছায়া দিও, আমলনামা ডান হাতে দিও আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, তুমি তাদেরকে নিশ্চিন্ত মনে রেখো কিয়ামতের দিন যখন মানুষ হিসাব দিতে ব্যতিব্যস্ত থাকবে আল্লাহ, তুমি তাদেরকে বিদ্যুতের গতিতে পুলসিরাত পার হওয়ার তৌফিক দান করো আল্লাহ এবং তাদেরকে বিনা হিসাবে জান্নাতুল ফেরদৌসে দাখিল করো আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, তোমরা তারা আল্লাহ পৃথিবীর থেকে তোমার কাছে গিয়েছে আল্লাহ, পৃথিবীর মানুষের থেকে আমাদের থেকে তুমি উত্তম আল্লাহ, তুমি সর্বোত্তম আল্লাহ, তুমি উত্তম আল্লাহ, তুমি তাদের সর্বোত্তম দেখভাল করো আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, তুমি আমাদের যারা দুনিয়াতে আমরা এখন জীবিত আছি বা যারা আসবে ভবিষ্যতে আল্লাহ, তুমি আমাদেরকে, আমাদের সন্তান সন্ততিকে, আমাদের আত্মীয় স্বজনকে, আমাদের পাড়া প্রতিবেশীকে, আমাদের দেশবাসীকে, আমাদের বিশ্ববাসীকে হেদায়েত করো, হেফাজত করো, রহমত করো, মাগফিরাত করো আল্লাহ। আমাদেরকে মাফ চাওয়ার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ, তোমার সাথে সম্পর্ক জোড়ার তৌফিক দান করো আল্লাহ। তুমি আমাদেরকে আপন করে নাও আল্লাহ, তুমি আমাদেরকে তোমার করে নাও আল্লাহ। আমাদের নফস চায় না, নফসের থেকে আমাদের হেফাজত করো। শয়তান চায় না, শয়তানের ধোঁকার থেকে আমাদের হেফাজত করো আল্লাহ। দুনিয়ার চাকচিক্যের থেকে আমাদেরকে হেফাজত করো আল্লাহ, আমাদেরকে আপন করে নাও আল্লাহ। প্রত্যেকটা কাজ যাতে উঁচু ইমানের সাথে কেবলমাত্র তোমার সন্তুষ্টির জন্য করতে পারি, তোমার তোমার নবীর সুন্নত মতো করতে পারি আল্লাহ। এবং যে কাজ করলে তুমি খুশি হও সে কাজ করার তৌফিক দান করো আল্লাহ। নামাজ যেভাবে পড়লে তুমি সন্তুষ্ট হও সেভাবে পড়ার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ। আল্লাহ, যেই এলেম শিখলে আমাদের আমাদের উপকারে আসবে আল্লাহ, সেই এলেম শিখার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ, ইলমান নাফিয়া আল্লাহ, এবং তার উপর আমল করার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ। তোমাকে স্মরণ করার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ, প্রত্যেকটা ওঠা বসাতে আল্লাহ 24 ঘন্টা তোমাকে স্মরণ করার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, মানুষের উপকার করার তৌফিক দাও, কারো ক্ষতি যাতে না না হয় আমাদের দ্বারা, হাতের দ্বারা, মুখের দ্বারা, কোনো কাজের দ্বারা আল্লাহ। মানুষের প্রতি যে দায়িত্ব সেটা পালন করার তৌফিক দাও আল্লাহ। তোমার বাণী মানুষের কাছে পৌঁছে দেওয়ার তৌফিক দান করো আল্লাহ। যে জন্য আমাদেরকে শ্রেষ্ঠ উম্মত হিসাবে সৃষ্টি করেছো সেই কাজটা করার তৌফিক দান করো আল্লাহ, এবং প্রত্যেকটা কাজ তোমার সন্তুষ্টি সহকারে যাতে করতে পারি আল্লাহ, সেই তৌফিক দান করো আল্লাহ। আমাদেরকে সর্বোত্তম গুণে গুণান্বিত করো আল্লাহ। তোমার ভালোবাসা আমাদের অন্তরে দান করো আল্লাহ, তোমার হাবিবের ভালোবাসা আমাদের অন্তরে দান করো আল্লাহ। এবং পৃথিবীতে বিভিন্ন মানুষ অন্নহারা, বস্ত্রহারা, গৃহহারা, দিশাহারা, পথহারা, কন্যা দায়গ্রস্ত, রোগগ্রস্ত, ঋণগ্রস্ত, অভাবগ্রস্ত, জুলুমগ্রস্ত, সবার প্রয়োজন তুমি মিটিয়ে দাও আল্লাহ। সবার বিপদ আপদ দূর করে দাও আল্লাহ, সবার সবার ঘাটতি পূরণ করে দাও আল্লাহ। সবার কারো কেউ যদি নির্যাতিত থাকে তাদের নির্যাতন দূর করে দাও আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, তুমি নির্যাতন দূর করে দাও আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, তাদের প্রয়োজন মিটিয়ে দাও আল্লাহ, তাদের অভাব অনটন দূর করে দাও আল্লাহ। আমরাও বিভিন্ন প্রয়োজনে, বিভিন্ন নেক হাজতে হাত উঠিয়েছি তোমার কাছে আল্লাহ, তুমি আমাদের নেক হাজত পুরা করে দাও আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, ও আল্লাহ, তুমি আমাদের নেক হাজত পুরা করে দাও। কোন নেক হাজত যদি পৃথিবীর জীবনের জন্য ক্ষতিকর হয় তুমি তার বদলা আখিরাতে দিও আল্লাহ। আমরা যদি অসুস্থ থেকে থাকি, যারা আমরা অসুস্থ আমাদের মধ্যে, বা আত্মীয় স্বজন অসুস্থ, বা সন্তান সন্ততি অসুস্থ, বা পাড়া প্রতিবেশী অসুস্থ, বা কোনো মুসলমান কোনো জায়গায় অসুস্থ, বা বিশ্ববাসী অসুস্থ, তুমি তাদের অসুখ দূর করে দাও আল্লাহ, তুমি হেফাজত করো আল্লাহ, তুমি দূর করার মালিক আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, আমরা যারা বিপদ আপদে আছি আল্লাহ, বা আমাদের আত্মীয় স্বজন বিপদ আপদে আছে, বা আমাদের পরিচিতরা বিপদ আপদে আছে, তুমি আমাদের বিপদ আপদ দূর করে দাও আল্লাহ, তুমি বিপদ আপদ দূর করার মালিক আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, আমরা অত্যন্ত দুর্বল, তুমি শক্তিশালী আল্লাহ। আমরা ফকির, তুমি বাদশাহ আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, আমরা গুনাহগার, তুমি ক্ষমাকারী আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, ও আল্লাহ, তুমি আমাদেরকে আপন করে নাও আল্লাহ। আমাদের হাত ধরে, আমাদের হাত ধরে আমাদের পিছনে যে আমাদের শয়তান লেগে আমাদের আমাদের নফস আমাদের পিছনে লেগে আছে, শয়তান আমাদের পিছনে লেগে আছে, দুনিয়ার চাকচিক্য আমাদেরকে প্রলোভনে ফেলছে আল্লাহ। প্রতিটা মুহূর্তে তুমি যদি আমাদের হাত ধরে কবর পর্যন্ত পৌঁছে না দাও আল্লাহ, আমাদের পক্ষে সম্ভব না আল্লাহ। আমরা অত্যন্ত দুর্বল আল্লাহ, তুমি জানো আমরা অত্যন্ত দুর্বল। তোমার কোরআনে তুমি বলেছো আমরা দুর্বল আল্লাহ, আমরা আসলেই দুর্বল আল্লাহ। আমরা নিজেদেরকে কোনো প্রলোভন থেকে যে রক্ষা করব সেটা আমাদের পক্ষে সম্ভব না আল্লাহ। তোমার নবী ইউসুফ আলাইহিস সালামও এই ধরনের দোয়া করেছিলেন যে তুমি যাতে উনাকে প্রলোভন থেকে রক্ষা করো, এবং যদি রক্ষা না করো তাহলে উনি প্রলোভনে পড়ে যাবেন। তো আমরা তো সামান্য মানুষ আল্লাহ, আমরা তো আরো বেশি প্রলোভনে পড়ে যাব আল্লাহ, তুমি যদি আমাদের রক্ষা না করো আল্লাহ। ও আল্লাহ, এবং মৃত্যুর সময় শয়তানের শেষ চেষ্টা বিফল করে দিও আল্লাহ। শেষ চেষ্টা বিফল করে কলেমা আমাদের মুখ থেকে উচ্চারণ করে উঁচু ইমানের সাথে যাতে আমরা পৃথিবী থেকে যেতে পারি, যাতে আমাদের কবরের জীবনে তোমার সর্বোত্তম ব্যবহার পেতে পারি, এবং হাসরের ময়দানে তোমার সর্বোত্তম ব্যবহার পেতে পারি, এবং বিদ্যুতের গতিতে পুলসেরাত পার হতে পারি, এবং বিনা হিসাবে জান্নাতুল ফেরদৌসে দাখিল হতে পারি আল্লাহ। اللهم أسألك إيمانا كاملا، يقينا صادقا، علما نافعا، رزقا واسعا، عملا صالحا، حياة طيبة، دعاء مستجاب، لسانا ذاكرا، قلبا خاشعا، رزقا حلالا طيبا، شفاء من كل داء، يا قاضي الحاجات، يا رفيع الدرجات، يا حلال المشكلات، يا موجب الدعوات، يا قاضي الحاجات، يا رفيع الدرجات، يا حلال المشكلات، يا موجب الدعوات، برحمتك نستغيث، يا أول الأولين، يا آخر الآخرين، يا أكرم الأكرمين، يا أرحم الراحمين، يا أول الأولين، يا آخر الآخرين، يا أكرم الأكرمين، يا أرحم الراحمين. ربنا تقبل مني إنك أنت السميع العليم। والله والله, আমরা অত্যন্ত দুর্বল, এত দুর্বল যে আমাদের মঙ্গলের জন্য কি চাওয়া উচিত তোমার মতো পরম পরম পরাক্রমশালী বাদশার কাছে, সেটাও আমরা জানি না। তোমার তরফ থেকে তুমি দান করো আল্লাহ। আমাদের কিসের থেকে হেফাজত চাওয়া উচিত তাও জানি না, তোমার তরফ থেকে হেফাজত দান করো আল্লাহ। সুবহান রাব্বিকা রাব্বিল ইজ্জাতি আম্মা ইয়াসিফুন ওয়া সালামুন আলাল মুরসালিন ওয়ালহামদুলিল্লাহি রাব্বিল আলামিন ওয়া হাক্কি লা ইলাহা ইল্লাল্লাহ মুহাম্মাদুর রাসূলুল্লাহ সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম। আমিন ইয়া রাব্বিল আলামিন, আমিন ইয়া রাব্বিল আলামিন, আমিন ইয়া রাব্বিল আলামিন। ইনশাআল্লাহ আমরা সামনের রোববারে সমবেত হব। আল্লাহ তাআলা তৌফিক দেন।